Hi, everyone. Welcome to Samudra Shakti Online. I'm glad you're with us. Tonight, we have Julia Pearring presenting, and she is an experienced certified Anusara Yoga teacher and a certified yoga therapist with the International Association of Yoga Therapists, which is also called IAYT. Julia supports students in the exploration of their optimal range, uncovering their strength and potential for a deeper alignment, no matter their current range of movement. She started teaching Anusara Yoga in 2008, and in that same year, she had a sequence of life-changing experiences that ignited her passion for the core principles of yoga and how Anusara Yoga brings them into being through the universal principles of alignment. That said, she had to know more about how and why they work. It led her to many advanced studies outside of the community, including extensive anatomy, kinesthesiology, and physiology training through cadaver dissections with Gil Hedley, explorations of body-mind centering and Laban movement analysis with Amy Matthews, fascial research with Tom Myers, and much more. Everything she has studied has both challenged her assumptions and revealed a deeper understanding of the method of Anusara Yoga. In the past 10 years, she has built a thriving private therapeutic yoga practice. As well, she serves as the managing director of the World Yoga Center, an Anusara Yoga affiliate school that has been in New York City for almost 50 years. She loves to lead retreats and train teachers. She strongly believes that an active sadhana, basing one's personal practice on committed self-inquiry and compassionate process, is invaluable for yoga teachers and practitioners. Julia lives in New York City. She's the mother of two sweethearts, and recently she co-wrote the Therapeutic Applications of Anusara Yoga Teachers Guide, published in 2021, along with 4 other incredibly talented Anusara Yoga teachers. She is ever grateful to be a part of this community, and I welcome Julia, and I'm handing it over for Julia and our topic tonight. Yoga is therapeutic. Julia?
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Midori. Thank you for this space. Thank you all for joining. And thank you for being interested. Yoga as therapeutic. I was reading back over what I wrote as the lineup for the class and was like, oh my goodness, what did I set myself up for? Like, this is a huge topic. So I really just broke down, what I wrote in that moment of inspiration of, it was propelled from the guide becoming available to certified teachers. And speaking with a few others, Ellen will present on this in a few months as well. So, what did what did it feel like to get to this point after all the work we did and all that I've, even in the last year, continued to learn, given new circumstances, like what does it mean that yoga is therapeutic? And we're constantly refining and constantly rediscovering the truth of that. And so, in many ways, yoga is therapeutic. It's inherent to the practice. And we know that because of everything from the fact that, it's a lineage, it's a living current of grace. You can just sit with that. And in that way, yoga is therapeutic. I mean, why do we learn the history of yoga? It's not to know the dates, but to really get a view of what we've been gifted, what we're a part of, right? We love to teach themes on our ancestors, right? And what is all that has come into the practice of yoga and how it's transformed and arises today to meet the needs of today, but also, the core of it and where it comes from, that living current of grace. It's right there in our name, Anusara. But also, yoga is therapeutic because it's movement, especially what is in this day and age been so key, how it has arisen, is that it brings us back to movement at a time and an age where movement is lost for many of us, or in some ways stripped from us due to, just the way our work life sets us up to sit in a chair all day. And so, even in the guide, movement is key to how yoga is therapeutic in this day and age. Just the fact that we link with our breath and we move through full range in our joints. We have a differing sequences, so we enter poses and exit them differently. So we load the body differently constantly. We use isometric tensions. We use closed chain work. We put blocks and walls in places. So there's everything from kind of the depth of the esoteric and what is lineage to exactly how it meets us today and our needs to keep moving. And so it's that you can just say yoga is therapeutic and yes. And then, of course, we also then want to embody that more. We want to, be the vessel of it, right? We want to be that next living length, that next vessel that arises, that brings the grace through as part of the lineage. And so, we have our 3 A's, and I just noticed in my, description, I wrote intention, knowledge, and effort. I had early in my days, it was like, all I could see everywhere I looked was the 3 A's written in different language, or different sequence of words. It was like, oh, there it is again, and it was some other system or some other place. And it's like, yeah, that's totally the 3 A's, it's totally Ichiyana Kriya. It's totally attitude, alignment, and action. And so I'm just going to frame it in how I wrote it in the description: intention, knowledge, and effort. So how do we apply those three in order to be sure and to, first of all, it comes all with attitude, or it comes all with intention to set ourselves up for that, to really start with that as our goal. And so, it also just came up tonight. I was like, I was setting up my bio to send to Lisa, and I was like, oh my goodness, that first line in my bio, like, I've changed so many things in my bio, but the first line I've never changed. It's always been the same: to support students in the exploration of their optimal range, to uncover their strength and potential, no matter their current range. Like, how do we start with that? That's the intention. That it's just, it always has been. It's like, there's nothing else I've needed to begin with. Like, it's just, that's how it framed for me. That's how it came out for me at a very, very early stage. So what is that intention? It's the intention to hold space for our students, right? To meet them where they are. And so that we support them as they journey, right? From open to grace to organic energy. We hold the space for them. And there's so many ways in which we're active in that space, but it starts with that intention. It's definitely not to fix something that we think that doesn't look good for the eye, right? We start with seeing the beauty. We have this intention that there's this that there's something there that we're all able to glean in the moment, right? That there's our own process, our own unfolding, that while at the same time there's wholeness, there is that ever refining part of our practice. So we're interested then in how do we support our students in doing that. And it's in the guide, there's just so many ways in which we look at even the new knowledge on fascia, for instance, as a inner sensation, right? As a way of knowing who we are, that is sharper and provides way more information than what we can see. How did I grew up, what we saw was our most dominant, like that was truth, right? What we see. You know, but actually, even more than that, how we know, you know, what information we get, you know, the signals we get are actually from our own inner movement, from, you know, parts of ourselves moving around ourselves. Like we're holding space so that students have this movement, they have this process, and they are supported in it. And yet we're just there to meet them where they are. And the you know, part of me is also like, oh my goodness, like what happened this last year, and how many things changed. You know, I was reading through the guide, and there's so, you know, there's, and even I'm about to set up a bridge where it's like, how do we talk about adjustments? Like, how do we talk about observation? Like, how do we talk about all of these things? You know, what, you know, how are things continuing to refine? How are we actually, you know, still always in that refiner's fire, so that our intention holds up, right? Our intention to support people in that space, even if we're not in the same space. You know, it's not a question where there's an answer, right? Intention. It's that place where we begin, where we meet people. And you know, I remember one of my students at some point, you know, it was like, I don't get as much feedback from you. You know, I don't get, you know, like it was a bit of a complaint, you know, like I don't get, and her name's not Sarah, but Sarah, you know, just lift her back in her thigh, or, you know, I don't get that anymore. You know, this was, you know, in the middle of the summer. And then a few weeks later, she wrote back, and I mean, I think I just responded and said, I know, I totally miss, you know, calling your name across the room, and seeing that little lift. You know, I'm with you. She you know, emailed me a few weeks later, and she said, you know what, I realize I have to listen better, you know, and I realize that it's now up to me, you know, that you know, the space is there, but it's, you know, how much more it's up to me. So there, you know, even going through the guide and being like, is it still, like, what's still relevant? You know, something changed now that we, you know, we're not in the room. And, you know, training teachers, you know, you stand next to someone and their energy shifts, you know, there's this way of supporting them there. But it really just starts with intention. You know, that's where it starts. And then everything unfolds from there. It's open to grace, and everything unfolds from there, that you can meet them where they are in the way that you can in that moment, right? And we get to, you know, I even wrote, you know, we want to be able to support the riskier sides of what it takes to grow and expand. You know, that's the intensity of inherent trauma, compensation patterns, you know, areas of unexplored potential. And while it's, you know, we still have to make this distinction between, this is a therapeutics applications, how therapeutics can be applied in yoga versus yoga therapy. There is a distinction still between those two. And I'd be happy if anyone has questions to make that that distinction you know, during the Q&A. But the truth of that is that we're inviting them to be successful in how they move. You know, we're setting up a place for them where, because that we all have inherent traumas, because we all have unexplored areas of potential, you know, we're looking for that place where we say, you know, I think that there's something there for them, right? Their process is going to unfold more in the same way that yoga is just going to continue to nudge us to refine and expand. Like, how do we hold that space for them in order to do so? Well, you have to create movements where they can be successful and get under patterns and grab something new for themselves, and have it be a movement from open to grace to organic energy. So, I mean, one of the parts that I'm passionate about within the guide is, it has to do with this. How do we set up intention-filled practices so that we grab hold of the way that yoga is therapeutic? Like, how do we do that? And I mean, in some ways, I definitely won't go into it, even though I'm always right on the edge. But back in Sarva Samyukta, what we did in the fall, we did a presentation, and I went a lot into patterns and how we support. And there's a lot in the guide on that, on how we invite people, because this is even a Desikachar quote. But his quote is, your yoga has to be smarter than your patterns or your habits. Like you have to be able to see the places that are caught, or see this in snares, right? To see that, and that we are in, and our intention is to nudge, right? Our intention is to invite people, and so we are creating a place where they can be successful, and they can also discover that for themselves, right? Where they can shift, and there's something more for them, and so it's a space of conversation. And that's definitely something that I'm missing to a certain degree of being in the room. I always start all my classes and I say, I'm muting everyone for background noise, but please, please unmute. Please, like, tell me what you heard, or what what you need, or what please, like, make this the conversation that it's meant to be. Because when, again, just that movement of fascia, just that movement within their own body, like, you're inviting a conversation that they need to have. Again, it's just the intention for a process for them. You're holding that space. That's going to happen. And we go a lot into the guide about balanced action, and we go, in some ways, the question kept being like, okay, are we getting too information based on muscles and tensegrity? Like, are we going too far in that direction? And it kept being like, no, we're staying rooted in the balance. What is balanced action? What is, what we're after, like a distribution of strain rather than a localizing. Like, we're after the conversation that the body needs to have, so it both knows wholeness, and it also knows that refiner's fire. It also knows that unfolding process. Like, so it's there is a lot of information, but I hope you'll find, and then as you go into it, you'll see within it that it's inviting the conversation that we need to have within ourselves. And it's inviting us to set up a space and to come with the intention, and then ultimately the knowledge, right? In order to create what is a successful space, in order for people to do that, to be able to, take movement that they need to make, the movement that they need to make, right? But it's also the space of conversation, in terms of, again, just not being able to get feedback from people, just ask them again and again. It's like, so what about this? Or what about that? Every time I start a private with someone, it's like, okay, so I'm going to ask you, tell me if anything changes, if you get any new information, just tell me, let's just keep the conversation going. How is this? What comes up here? I mean, the language people use it can be unbelievably interesting, right? And not because then I'm going to create a story around it and tell them who they are, but it's all of a sudden what comes up is like, well, this is irritating. It's like, it's irritating. I've never heard that about your, opening up your shoulder. It's irritating. Like, what comes up? What's the conversation? Like, what is that movement of wholeness? What is that movement of refinement? In the same way we use meditation, we run the tap, what's just been in the pipes and needs to move, right? We just need to run the tap. The same thing happens through our movement. So we create this space. It's what it is, and it's an intention-filled space. And because of that, it is inherently therapeutic. It doesn't mean we can't muck things up, but we also are, in learning and in our own, we're in our own practice as teachers. I mean, if you didn't know you were alone, you're not alone in that. We're all in our practice of teaching. We have our own sadhana there. We have our own process that we're moving through. So it's not that we can't muck it up, but if we keep coming back to that intention, we'll find our way through. And it always then leads us to knowledge, right? It always leads us to then how are we going to get there? This is, intention is great. And then how do we get there? How do we actually do this kind of high level that we, holding space and supporting our students in these explorations? And I don't know, this quote just popped out so much from the guide. We're talking about a web of fascia creating sensation. And I do love fascia. I don't know why I've said it 10 times tonight. It was not the intention, but maybe that's what's coming through, but the fascial web, we were talking about organic energy, and it says, what if this is the sensation you create? Like, I am a moving, vibrant, multi-layered self, defined by movement and adaptability in relationship with whatever is happening around me. And I have the added conviction that I can meet whatever challenges might arise. And that's, I mean, that's, imagine that as a definition of organic energy. Just the high level of process, right, and wholeness. And so I didn't pick out anything information based from the guide. I didn't pick out anything information based, but that's not what knowledge is necessarily, right? It is the way in which we keep referencing, our own process. We keep referencing where we are starting from, right? We keep referencing, the learning we've been through, right? And then the person who shows up and the needs they have, we're surprised that it fits, kind of what we have to offer. We're surprised by that, but also, we do that all the time, thank goodness. Because knowledge there's a vastness to it, but if we start with intention, if we start from where we are, the same invitation we ask our students to do, we have what we need. But I want to invite the guide as a reference for you. Get it and use it. Just open a page, just like so many other of your other references. Just add it to that core group of references that you have. It goes through everything from even just, again, kind of going through the principles from the eye of therapeutic applications, through patterning, through how we can set up repatterning, through, more on observation and assessment, and all the way through to, a whole toolbox of potential exercises and poses. And so then what are you going to, bring? What are you going to bring in that moment? So it's integrated with our deep lineage and our intention. It's integrated that with then, a good section that goes through joints, muscles, fascia, tensegrity. That's the flow we do for the physical aspect of it. And the manual, absolutely. And then how that creates a conversation, not the manual, the guide, absolutely. And how that creates a conversation with the students. I mean, who did you really learn everything from? This from your students, they from who walked in and what their needs were and how you met them there and what came from that. So just the conversation that that ensues for you from your intention of having yoga be therapeutic, and the way that you shape that with your knowledge, and the way that you are always in that constant space of learning with your students. And I mean, that brings me to effort. I mean, and in some ways I could almost in this moment say that effort could be two things. Can you stay curious and can you stay confident at the same time? Can those both be there at the same time? Because confidence alone will lead you to think long before you won't stay curious enough, right? And if you can get caught in curiosity too, right? Like, well, I don't know, let's see. And at some point also be like, just go for it. Just, again, know that if you've come from intention and you're keeping the conversation open, the two of them together will balance you right where you need to be for that effort that is needed in that moment. So none of that is something you learn and you're done with, right? All of this is a process, that process of teaching, and yet it's, let's even do a little thing like what in the last year, because what I'll say my question, then I'll give my own example. So what in the last year really put you on the spot in terms of what you needed to discover, what you needed to, get rid of, what you needed to process. Like, how was this last year part of your therapeutics, like part of your yoga? It's, you just think about that for a moment.
Let's drop that. Let's drop some answers in the chat, everybody. And let's hear what you have to say. Do you want to repeat the question, Julia?
Yeah. We're past the year mark, so we even have that much more to see, right? That much more in hindsight. But like, how was the last year exactly what you needed, right? It put you on the edge of your process in terms of what you needed to work through, what you needed to confront, what you had to let go of, so that your year was a therapeutic year, even though it could be so many other things at the same time. Yeah, Cynthia, the tough ones, right? The when they dissolve, right? Lost my studio community connection, maintained my Sunday class on Zoom. It's not the same, but better than nothing. I needed to let go of a relationship that was not allowing me to grow into my best self. The rest in time allowed me to see things more clearly. I needed to discover where freedom expands, exists, and is vital within limitation. Yep, as a traveling teacher, allow me to slow down, settle and be with myself, find creative ways to teach. Yeah. Yeah, resurfacing trauma triggered by challenges, pandemic, wildfire, uncertainty. Deal with and integrate. Yeah, I was sharing with Madhuri and Lisa before we logged on. I hosted one of the first Samudra Shakti online, and it was definitely before the pandemic. It must have been the December or January before. And it was the same time, and I have 2 young kids, and at the time it was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't do that from home. Like, that would be ridiculous. That would be crazy. I would be in my family environment, like I wouldn't, and so I rented a space that I knew I've used a few times and is nearby. Like coming back now, and it's like kids are in the other room. I mean, this whole year was a struggle of how do you like create boundaries and like, not just leave the family environment, but have boundaries within my family environment. It was like the most confronting thing I've ever had to do to feel that out. And yet it's like, oh, thank goodness. What was I thinking? How was I going to make it through life as a mother without boundaries within my family life? What was I going to do? Yeah. Managing fear of unknown and media. Yep. Totally. Heal from a herniated disc. Yeah. Compassionate, loving approach to my practice. Yeah. All of this. So what it comes to is that yoga is therapeutic. It's also, I mean, what we're talking about, like, yoga it has then that piece of sadhana, right? To it. It has the double-edged sword of both revealing our wholeness and that refinement that's necessary. It is the refiner's fire in both of those ways. And what I know is that the more that my process, I can trust it to be therapeutic, and I can offer it, into the yoga that I know. The more that I can do that, right, then the more that it is going to be possible for me to hold the space for others to do that. So it's, I love to train teachers, but it's not just people who are on the, teaching asana on the mat, right? It's the way in which we learn to hold that space for ourselves, and in whatever way we communicate it or whatever way we meet others, to hold that space, right? To have our intentions clear and to keep the conversation going. I mean, that's what I love about knowledge is it's the alignment piece, right? And it's really the bridge. It's a constant forging of a space between the intentions we set and ultimately how that comes through, through curious and confident action. And so whether we're on the holding space on the on in a class or in the seat of the teacher in that setting, or wherever we are, to have the conviction that yoga is therapeutic is based on our process of it being so, from intention through to all the way through to the efforts we make, from open to grace all the way through to organic energy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Know ourselves more and in deeper ways. Yes. And that Gianni wrote, the way that we know ourselves in deeper ways. In some ways, that I think that's where the fascia was coming through. There was something there, Gianni, that wanted to be articulated, is that, the conversation, the space you're holding, even for your student, again, just the running of the tap is, how much space do we have, right, in our daily life? Maybe this year gave us the space, or maybe this year, like me, I was like, I have to somehow create this space. But it's the, often for our students, or even, that's when I close the door, right? Is when I'm teaching a class. That's a space for me as well. It's the space in which we do have that time to process, to have all our different layers and tissues, slide and glide around each other, to have movement and breath link, to have a teacher, or to ask our student, and what about this, and how about this, what changed, what new information did you get? Okay, let's back out. Okay, let's go further. In all the ways in which we support them where they are. Big exhale. Yeah.
So, Julia, I'm wondering if you had just one or two things that you would really like to impart on this topic of fascia. Just if you could just nail that, I'd really love to hear a little synopsis. Yeah.
The topic of fascia. Well, the first off is that way in which it is it's how it's a way of knowing ourselves. So there's a conversation internally that happens when we move. When it's you can hold your arm up in the air, and at first it's about proprioception. It's like, oh, I think I know where my arm is in space. I think I know where I am in relationship to things around me, right? But at a certain point, if you keep holding it there, that information is clear. And what's next is like, well, how are you going to continue to hold this up? And like all the conversation that has to go on between differing layers, and like the blood, like everything, the pulsing of everything. What fascia really gets at is what is the connection of, it's even what is the blood vessels, right? That holds everything that flows. It's the boundary of everything. So it separates everything, but it also connects everything. So, as I hold my arm out here, like there's a whole internal conversation going on. And at some point it will take over even my desire to be with you all, right? It'll take over because my arm's gonna be like, what are you doing? And when are you going to stop this? There's something here that will have to be addressed, so we can also learn to not pay attention, even at very, very important moments, like potential injury, like bordering on injury, right? And so one of my favorite ways to bring it into mind with students, or in kind of from the teaching realm, is like, do you know where that wire is? Like, do you know when you're going to trip that wire? And we don't always. And it's not even to say then like, oh, well, you're clearly not, a good yoga practitioner yet. You'll know when you're going to trip the wire when you are. But the question of, are you in that conversation? Are you listening? You know, are you are you taking part in what is this unbelievable conversation of who you are, that is wholeness, and that is also constantly refining and finding out where, you know, where you're going to go next and what you're going to discover next. And so it also takes us, so that's part of it. It has the idea that it's something where we have more information coming from it than our eyes, is part of the invitation of what are we listening to, right? Are we only listening to what we see? You know, are we only, or are we, can we listen to, you know, what is a part of the movement and part of just the, you know, the presence of our layers and depth. But the other part of it is that the fact that it is continuous is, then we get into kind of the ideas of tensegrity, which get to the ideas of, are you going to localize strain or can you distribute it? And that, so then the idea of wholeness, you know, and it can be, you can decide what is wholeness. Well, you know, is it Gaiam? Is it the whole, you know, earth? Is it the universe? Like, but whatever you decide is wholeness, whatever you decide is the whole. So if you let that be the body, then, you know, do you, you know, localize it where strain, you're like, well, sorry, you know, someone's got to take the strain. I guess it'll be you. You know, so, or is there, you know, the idea of connection through your whole body and how we pulse with the principles, for instance, in and out from a focal point, a weighted space that could ultimately carry and distribute evenly, right? Is the intention for there to be a distribution of strain. So when we're working, I mean, that gets us a bit to patterns, or to how individually there'll be places where we haven't yet, we don't live there, we don't listen there, we don't know ourselves there, we've had to, you know, evacuate that space, or, you know, whatever it is, or just because a pattern has been so successful for us that we use it in places where, well, I mean, it's strong when we need this, but we don't need that right now, we need something else. And so that pattern isn't the one we need, you know, that's not what we need to organize to be able to support the distribution of strain in this moment. So we get to the place where the asana practice becomes this huge tug, and puts us in relationships with gravity where it's like, well, shoot, there's no bad pose, but I certainly don't know how to support myself here. You know, no fault of the pose. I don't know how to support myself here though. And so, you know, how do you back out? How do you set yourself up to come into and create the support you need, create the connection you need, and create it where you're not going to overuse a part of your body, or dump strain in a place where you don't know how to support. You know, all of this gets to, you know, a big portion of what you know, why do we need the information of fascia? Like, why do we need the information of how muscles work? Like, what is that for? It's for wholeness and it's for process. So we can start to see that, and we do see it, but not even because we're always looking at, you know, where things are in space, right? But because as we practice the movement of the principles and we start to see the way that principles move through, we're seeing whether that there is that connection through, or there is a disconnect, you know, what we call like an energy leak, like a locked knee, or you know, where you can just, you can see through to, and then what do? You know, you provide them a closed chain, or, you know, you put your hand on the end of their hand and say, you know, you got to somehow get through the elbow, not just, you know, flop at the elbow. You know, you put the hand there and you create that invitation for them to find the connection in and out from the focal point. You know, and you set up a place where they're going to be successful in doing that, so that they can then eventually build the strength. So you start with something where maybe even you have to lead them. So we have this whole flow even outlined in the guide of what it takes. You know, sometimes at first the person's like, I couldn't imagine that pathway. I couldn't imagine that that's a way in which I could get to myself, through myself. And so maybe you even lead, right? Maybe you even take them into that range of movement passively. You know, that's one end of the spectrum, right? Until you work your way through the spectrum and they're doing it on their own, or you're giving boundary, you know, let's boundary around the knee, and you can do this, but I'm going to provide the boundary. So we get through it, or to eventually where they're doing it. And at some point you're resisting it. At some point you're saying, I'm going to now, give you some resistance, and can you maintain that pathway? So there is a lot of knowledge in the guide on how we do this, on how I've just said, okay, we want to set them up for success. It's kind of a yes, of course. So there's ways in which we have part of our method is right there. It's ready. We are ready, and we do it intuitively. And then just to have it written is just this great reminder, because of all the different things that we're working with at any one time. You just open up, you're like, oh yeah, there it is, in and out of the focal point. Fantastic. That's what I needed to hear. Find your way through even just this contemplation of, how do I meet people where I am? Like the 3 A's, yoga is therapeutic. What does that mean? Where am I in my process? Where are my students in their process? Yeah.
On behalf of the Kula, thank you, Julia, for presenting tonight. Much gratitude. Good night, everybody.